Emily Chang, this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Uber hits reverse on Russia and gives the driver's seat to rival Yandex. We've got the details of the startup's second international retreat from a major market. Plus, Facebook doubles down on VR with a new headset and price tag, how the next generation hardware stacks up against industry leaders. And GOP senators unveil the latest version of the Affordable Care Act replacement. We'll get perspective on the new bill from insurance startup Oscar Health. First, to our lead. Uber is handing over the keys to its business in Russia. The U.S.-based ride-hailing giant has partnered up with what is known as the Google of Russia, Yandex. Uber will invest $225 million and take more than a third of a stake in the new venture that'll be valued at more than $3.7 billion. The move serves as the second retreat from a major international market for Uber. Last year, of course, Uber left China in exchange for a 17.5% stake in rival Didi Chuxing. This after losing more than $2 billion battling its competitor. Joining us now to discuss Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde from London, our guest host David Kirkpatrick, CEO of Techonomy, a New York-based media company that's hosted Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, Twitter's Jack Dorsey, and other tech heavyweights at its annual conference, and our Bloomberg tech reporter Eric Newcomer, who covers Uber. Eric, I have to start with you. How did this deal go down?
You know, it's been in the works for a while, back when Travis Kalanick and Emil Michael were still working in operational roles at the company. Uber's been negotiating this for a while, and I think it was just clear that they weren't going to have the lead position. You know, I think it's basically a 2-to-1 ratio. You know, imagine a revenue run rate of, $1 billion for Yandex Taxi and about 500 million for Uber. So Uber was just behind here, and they got a big stake of this negotiated new company. So I think it was a good deal in a market that they weren't going to win, and that they were losing, in excess of 150 million in.
So Yandex, Caroline, is of course the Google of Russia. They've got search, they've got mail, music, video. Why did Uber decide to wave the white flag?
Yeah, it seems that the Yandex Taxi was just too successful for it. As we heard, it's got about 2-to-1 ratio in terms of gross bookings. But this is a company that also was willing to splash the cash to diversify. It is like the Google. It's mainly dependent on search. I just dig into the Bloomberg, type in FA Go on Yandex, and you'll see that just 3% of revenue is currently coming from taxis. But they're trying to, of course, diversify themselves away from the 88% that they get in terms of search. They're willing to spend, and I think all of this shows, Emily, that once again, competitive barriers to entry aren't that high for these sorts of businesses. They can be copied because Yandex only got in 2011. It went separate from the overall parent business in 2015 called Yandex Taxi. It can get in, they can throw money at the situation, and notably, the regulators prefer domestic players, and Uber was having to pay quite a lot in terms of VAT due to a new tax from Putin.
David, it's easy to say Uber made a mistake by entering Russia in the first place here, just like they did in China. Or did they?
Well, if you think about the math, they're getting, 30-some% of a $3.7 billion business, which I calculated makes their portion worth over $1.3 billion, which has got to be more than they've invested. So that's not such a terrible outcome. I think Caroline has it entirely right that what we're really seeing more and more is that ride-hailing, despite Uber's strengths, is not a winner-take-all, increasing returns, network effect business. And therefore, they're just going to have to strategically choose their markets. And this is a country where a non-Russian company would have had a very hard time ever dominating. In fact, I don't think it would have been allowed.
Now, Eric, of course, Uber is in a great period of uncertainty right now. Travis Kalanick has resigned. They are looking for a new CEO. There are so many different issues, from sexual harassment issues to lawsuits. Bloomberg Gadfly has a piece out today that suggests a kinder, gentler Uber maybe in the future. What do you think the future holds? Will we see more retreats like this?
Yeah, I definitely think Uber wants to be kinder and gentler. It's going to be a learned skill, take a little bit of time. In terms of moving away from other markets, I think there are definitely investors who'd like to see Uber either be the aggressor in a deal, acquire someone like Ola or Grab, or cut a deal so that there's only a single player market. I think it's exactly right that we're learning that two players, at least as long as there's an abundance of capital, have been able to operate in many of these markets. And so it seems like the only way to sort of get a single player market is these sort of negotiated truces where, Uber takes a percentage and its competitor takes one. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more deals, in India and Southeast Asia going forward.
What about Europe, Caroline? I mean, it's not all rosy there. A lot of different countries and different laws to contend with, and new administrations.
Precisely, and there has been an aggressive push in the likes of Germany and France by Uber, and a lot of backlash. When I was living in Berlin, you couldn't really access Uber via the app. You could only use licensed taxis. Now, this is something actually that the regulatory risk is rearing its head in Russia once again. They're looking at where Yandex Taxi and Uber are going to be playing jointly now. They're also looking at whether they should only be using licensed taxis rather than normal drivers. Paris as well. We just had Donald Trump with Macron there, and Macron very focused on tech advances, but are they focused on US tech advances, and are they focused on allowing the likes of Uber and Uber Pop to thrive in their countries? Regulatory risk is huge here, I think, and that's certainly something that the likes of Yandex Taxi and Uber will come up against with this joint venture, which I might add is together worth $3.7 billion. No wonder we therefore saw Yandex's own share price spike today, up some 16%. It's at a record high because no one in Russia, the analysts themselves, had any idea that this was sort of valuation of its taxi unit.
Meantime, David, the New York Times out today with some potential names in the mix for the Uber CEO job, including Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, as well as a few seasoned executives who are actually available. Former Yahoo CEO Marissa Mayer, David Cush, former CEO of Virgin America, Adam Bain, former COO of Twitter. What do you make of some of these names?
Well, it's funny because I actually saw Marissa in London like the day after Travis Kalanick stepped down, and I said to her, you should take that job. You'd be perfect for that. And she didn't show any particular enthusiasm for it, but I think she has been an investor in Uber, actually. She knows the company super well. I believe she's friends with Kalanick and has, followed its progress very closely. So it wouldn't surprise me if they went after her. I think she's a terrific manager, despite what, sometimes is said about her leadership of Yahoo, which was a tough job. This would be a tough job, too. She's experienced with tough jobs. So that's one I would vote for.
Right. Marissa Mayer certainly not one to shy away from a talent challenge, and she has, of course, spoken positively about Travis Kalanick in the past. Of course, it's something I know our Eric Newcomer is chasing down, the ins and outs of the Uber CEO search. What do you know, Eric?
Yeah, I have to say I'm pretty skeptical that Marissa will be the next CEO of Uber. Sources are definitely don't think she's sort of seriously in the mix. I mean, she came out and defended Travis very publicly, and a lot of people at Uber were just sort of wondering what was going on over there. It seemed a little tone deaf to the situation. I think there are, a lot of the names we're hearing are people, like you said, sort of without real gigs, and I think it'll take some time for Uber to land on someone, and I think they're trying to keep it pretty secret, and they're definitely looking at, top execs and airline, that kind of sort of global operations. So I think that's where we're going to look. I mean, it's possible there's a tech exec, and there are a lot of jobs available, CFO, COO, independent chairperson, and CEO. So we're certainly going to get a mix of characters, but I think we're going to have to wait, and it's very much a live process at the moment.
Right. Another name that I know you floated is former Disney COO Tom Stagg. So we will continue to follow and watch for your reporting. Eric Newcomer, who covers Uber for Bloomberg Technology, Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde in London, and Techonomy CEO David Kirkpatrick, you are sticking with me. Now, a stock we are watching, Snap reversed its recent losses, rising 3% in Thursday's session. The stock was upgraded to buy from hold at Stifel. Analyst Scott Devitt reiterating his $22 price target. At the moment, there are currently 12 buys, 17 holds, and 5 sell ratings for Snap shares. Coming up, Facebook has big plans to make its Oculus headset a mass market phenomenon. But can it really happen? This is Bloomberg. Going now to Facebook, reinvesting efforts into its Oculus Rift headset in order to make it the standout device in the VR industry. Later this year, the company is planning to reveal a wireless and cheaper version of the headset, but will it catch on? I want to bring in our Bloomberg Tech consumer tech reporter, Mark Gurman in New York. Still with us, David Kirkpatrick of Techonomy. Mark, you broke this story. What is Facebook working on?
Well, they're working on making a big push in VR. You see, they already have the Oculus Rift and the Gear VR, but what they want to do is they want to go after this sweet spot. Right now, virtual reality either connects to a phone or a high-powered several $100 or $1,000 PC. This would be a device just like an iPhone or an iPod or an Apple Watch. You take it out of the box and you can hook it up to Wi-Fi in the network and just use it. You have the screen in there, the lenses, everything. You don't need to hook it up to anything. It's completely wireless. And at $200, they're expecting to sell a lot of these.
The Oculus division at Facebook has been a bit troubled. The co-founder has left. Another one has moved into a different position. They've brought on Hugo Barra from Xiaomi to run it. Do you get the sense that things are back in order at Oculus?
Right. This is a completely different company than it was 1 or 2 years ago. Bringing in Hugo Barra brought someone with experience. He really led the Android efforts at Google. He understands the wants of consumers. He understands how important it is not to only have a research division and doing a lot of skunkworks projects that are longer term, but he understands how critical it is for this company to churn out consumer products that people are going to run to the stores to buy every holiday season, just like people want to buy the latest Samsung phone or the latest iPad. They've also hired some people from Apple, a lot of high-level executives. Michael Hillman they hired earlier this year to run all of their hardware components of the company. So clearly there's a sea change going on at Oculus. And what we're going to see later this year when they announce this product is the first real fruit of that.
David, Mark Zuckerberg's big bet on VR was bold, but it's been far from a sure thing. Do you think that this is a market that Oculus can dominate? Well,
dominate is to be proven, but you know, Mark Zuckerberg is known for long-term bets and long-term thinking, and I'm sure in his mind there's no fundamental disappointment thus far. He believes social is going to be virtual. And in other words, we're going to be interacting kind of Facebook-esque in virtual spaces in the not distant future. They've demonstrated crude versions of that at some of their conferences. So from his point of view, this is inevitable. He knows somebody's going to do it. Therefore, he feels Facebook has to do it. I think there's unlimited resources inside Facebook for making this work. I agree. Bringing in Hugo Barra, huge step forward. And it's pretty impressive that Facebook's hardware division would have somebody of that quality. It just goes to show Facebook's becoming another diversified tech conglomerate, practically.
Mark, how does this Oculus headset compare to the other options on the market, which have been out there longer?
Right, so there's a few options to your point. There's the Samsung Gear VR. It's $130, and what you have to do is you have to plug a Galaxy smartphone into the device. You put it on your head, but again, it requires the phone. That's why it's so cheap. Then there's the Rift. The Rift is $400, but that doesn't include the price of a high-powered gaming PC that you need to connect it to in order to stream the games to it. There's also cheaper players for under $100. There's the Daydream VR from Google. You can put in a Google Pixel in there. But there is opportunity here for a device that's all-inclusive at a low cost, and that's what Oculus is going after with this device, codenamed Pacific.
And Hugo Barra came over from Xiaomi, the Chinese smartphone maker. How does Xiaomi fit in here?
Yeah, that's very interesting, the timeline here, with Hugo Barra joining a few months ago and then Oculus having been in discussions for some time with Xiaomi in order to produce this thing. Right now, Xiaomi, it's not a contract manufacturing company. It actually has a network of manufacturers where it outsources the development of its own smartphones to. And so Facebook is in talks with Xiaomi, and the current plan is to work with Xiaomi on producing this device. And Facebook doesn't really have strong brand recognition, as we all know, in China and other parts of Asia. So what they're going to do here is kill two birds with one stone. Not only is the partnership with Xiaomi going to result in the manufacturing of this product, but the version of the device sold in China is actually going to have Xiaomi branding on it and some Xiaomi software, whereas across the world elsewhere outside of China, it's going to be a singularly Oculus product.
Emily, can I ask Mark a question?
Go for it, David.
Mark, you know, the thing, it's all very impressive. And like I said, Facebook's determined they'll get there eventually. But, you know, okay, this isn't going to be as powerful as the high-end Oculus device. What are people going to use it for? Because there isn't really a killer app outside of gaming, right?
I completely agree with you. There is not a killer app, but what we have here is a stepping stone. We have something tangible. Oculus has been teasing this Santa Cruz prototype, as they've been calling it, a all-inclusive device that has the power of a Rift VR for extraordinarily great gaming and all that does not need to connect to a high-powered, expensive PC. But what we have here is something today, well, not today, 6 months down the road, but that's as close as we're going to get, because this Santa Cruz all-inclusive Rift high-powered device is years away. So what we're going to have is people actually being able to use VR. The fact that we're going to see VR out in the wild here is going to spur development, not only from Oculus, but all the other players. It's also going to create a new gold rush for app developers, just like there's a whole gold rush of apps on the iPhone, the iPad, the Apple Watch, go across the pond to the Google Pixel and whatnot. This is really going to create interest. And I sort of agree with you, there's no killer app, but I can imagine, like we said in the story, a lot of people pulling this out on an airplane to watch a movie instead of pulling out their phone or tablet.
Interesting. All right. Mark Gurman, our Bloomberg Tech consumer tech reporter. Thanks so much. David Kirkpatrick of Techonomy, you are sticking with me. Coming up, we get the latest read on Apple's iPhone as one of the biggest suppliers reports earnings. This is Bloomberg. Apple's next edition of its iPhone is one of the most anticipated product releases of the year for both consumers and suppliers, counting on the upcoming device to fuel the growth of global smartphone shipments. One supplier is Taiwan Semiconductor, one of Apple's biggest customers, accounting for about 17% of Taiwan Semi's revenue. Joining us now for the latest read on the company, Bloomberg's Peter Elstrom, still with us as well, David Kirkpatrick, CEO of Techonomy. Peter, what does what we've seen from Taiwan Semiconductor mean about how things are going at Apple?
Well, it's interesting. There are a couple of companies in Asia that are closely watched as kind of proxies for Apple and where demand is going in the future. TSMC helps manufacture the chips that go into iPhones and other Apple products. So TSMC reported earnings today. They were a little light for the second quarter, which was not that big of a deal. It's historically kind of a slow quarter. But really what people were looking for is their forecast for the next quarter and the rest of the year, because that gives us some insight into what kind of demand they're expecting for the next iPhone, the hotly anticipated next iPhone, of course. And that forecast came in pretty light in terms of estimates. So that was a little bit of a surprise. It was a little bit negative for TSMC, and it raised questions about how strong they think the demand for this new iPhone is going to be.
David, Taiwan Semiconductor is in a hugely competitive business. Margins are slim to slimmer. What's your take?
Well, the thing about Taiwan Semiconductor is they have done an extraordinary job over decades of chasing the technology down, so they're always at the cutting edge. I mean, their next generation of 7-nanometer chips, which they're building now, and they're talking about a $10 billion capital investment for this year, which amazes me because it's more than a quarter's revenues. I mean, I don't think I know of other companies that invest more than one quarter's revenues in capital. That's extremely rare. I mean, it just goes to show their own confidence in their business, despite what might happen with the iPhone, has got to be strong. They've shown that confidence over decades, like I said, and I'm sure as this industry, fewer and fewer companies can spend that kind of money and be in this business. They are a keeper.
So, Peter, there's another interesting development here. The founder of Taiwan Semi, Morris Chang, his fortune is ever expanding. Tell us a little bit about him.
That's right. Well, TSMC's stock price has been on a bit of a roll here, and that's helped him. He founded the company back in 1987 with some help from the Taiwanese government. As David mentioned, they make these massive investments in chip plants, and that historically has been a very good business, especially as smartphone demand has taken off. So this year, with the shares up about 17%, he became a billionaire based on his stake. So he's done very well with his business so far, and obviously they're hoping that it's going to continue from here.
So when talking to other suppliers in China, what have we been able to glean about the outlook for the next iPhone?
Well, I'd say when you look at the key players, TSMC is one of them. Hanhai is really the other one, the major contract manufacturer for the iPhone. Their shares have also been on a tear. They're sounding quite optimistic about what is going to happen in the future. I think the overall challenge is the smartphone market has gone from very fast growth to slowing growth, shrinking in some quarters that we've seen. So there's this overall concerns about whether there's going to be ongoing strong demand. The forecasts for this year are for nominal growth, about 3%. So we'll see whether they're able to deliver on that. But Hanhai is another good proxy for demand for Apple, at least.
Quick one, David. iPhone 8. Are you excited about it?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've got to deliver something exciting or they're going to really feel it bad. So I think, yes, we have to believe they will excite us and they will impress us. I'm confident they will.
All right, David Kirkpatrick, CEO of Techonomy, you're sticking with me. Bloomberg's Peter Elstrom, thanks so much for stopping by. Coming up, leadership in Washington continues the attempt to repeal and replace Obamacare. We will speak with the CEO of Oscar Health, a startup aiming to disrupt the entire healthcare industry next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has wrapped up his tour of the Persian Gulf, where he's been trying to mitigate the crisis between Qatar and 4 Arab neighbors. He says his diplomacy focused on creating written documents listing the issues so each could be addressed specifically. Theresa May's Brexit draft law, which she unveiled today, sparked a furious backlash from Scotland and Wales. It will transfer EU laws onto the British statute book. But the leaders of the Scottish and Welsh governments say it fails to give them sufficient powers and threatens to block the bill in votes in their national legislatures. Turkey has agreed to pay $2.5 billion to acquire Russia's most advanced missile defense system. It's an about-face from the NATO military alliance that has anchored Turkey to the west for more than 6 decades. The Russian deal will allow Turkey to deploy the missile system anywhere in the country. China's jailed Nobel Peace Prize winner Liu Xiaobo has died from multiple organ failure related to cancer. The 61-year-old author and former university lecturer was transferred from prison to a hospital last month after his condition worsened. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Thursday here in Washington, already 7:30 Friday morning in Sydney. We are joined by Bloomberg's Paul Allen. He's got a look at the markets. Paul, another record for the Dow, although not much movement for stocks here in the States.
That's right, and it's translating to a mixed outlook for the Asia-Pacific. We got a mixed picture for Nikkei futures, although Chicago futures are looking a little higher as we wait on industrial production numbers for May out of Japan. Also keep an eye on fast retailing in Japan, reporting third quarter earnings after the close on Thursday. Third quarter net profit missing estimates coming in at $22.9 billion versus the $28.3 billion expected, and it would have been worse had it not been for Uniqlo's international expansion, mitigating some pretty sluggish growth in Japan, although fast retailing maintaining full-year forecast. Here in Australia, ASX futures also pointing down by about 9 points. Keep an eye on the miners today. The spot iron ore price popping again, up almost 3% to $65.91 for delivery to Qingdao as Chinese iron ore imports head for a record expected to surpass 1 billion tonnes. Elsewhere, watch out for the start of the National Work Conference in China. This only happens once every 5 years, and we may get a few clues on who the next PBOC governor will be. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Back to a story we continue to watch. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has released a revised Republican health care bill, and he's seeking conservative support by letting insurers sell low-premium policies with minimal coverage. The bill is aimed at repealing much of President Obama's health care law. Joining us now from New York to expand on broader health care issues and how it may impact insurance companies as a whole, Oscar Health CEO Mario Schlosser. Mario, we'll talk about Oscar's mission in a moment, but first, obviously, there is a huge debate and a lot of uncertainty about the future of health care in this country. What does that mean for you?
I kind of come back to first principles when I think about this. And what I expect to happen is that nobody in DC will be suicidal enough and crazy enough to throw 21 billion people who are individually insured right now back onto the market without insurance. I probably shouldn't call the play-by-play what's going to happen in the Senate, in the House, the next few weeks and months. But I do think at the end of the day, we're going to get to a market that's stable. And that will point hopefully also a bit more into towards the future. And the future, as I think it needs to be in US healthcare and health insurance, is individuals and consumers have to become more powerful, making choices in what healthcare they want and demanding better outcomes from the system, better value from the system. I think that's where, again, it connects to our mission. I mean, we built an insurance company that uniquely engages individuals on their healthcare with an eye towards lowering their healthcare costs and improving the quality of healthcare that they receive.
You guys are partnering with one of the biggest insurance providers in the country, Humana, launching healthcare for small businesses. Why would one of your rivals want to partner with you?
I think that's we came into the market with a very, very unique angle. If you look at the US healthcare system, we vastly overpay for what it produces. We pay about 18% of GDP for healthcare. Germany, where I'm from, Switzerland, Japan, all pay about 10, 11% of GDP. That's about $1 trillion per year that the US is overspending for the outcomes it gets. There are two things that are wrong, I think, with US healthcare at a vendor fundamental level. One is the data doesn't flow through the system in a very good way. And the second thing is nobody actually gets paid for outcomes, if you really look at the way the payment system works. And we thought 5 years ago we started the company, the insurer is in a unique position to do something about that. If we are able to make the data flow better, your doctor actually will know which other drugs you are on or what happens in the ER you might have visited a couple hours before. That's all the connectivity we provide. And we can also help tilt the system towards a system where you get paid less for fee for service, for stuff you do in a practice, and more for outcomes. What you need for that is a technology-driven insurance company that engages the consumer before you potentially even become sick. That's what we have built. What I think other partners in the system, like the Cleveland Clinic, which we have a risk-sharing plan with, we built, announced recently, and Humana in Nashville now for small businesses, is that they think that we have a very unique technology and engagement model that can help them get into this future where individuals will have more decision-making power in healthcare.
So talk to me about this tech-driven part of this. What makes Oscar a tech company rather than just another insurance company?
I'd say there's three categories of technology we built. We have a very unique model around engaging the consumer, the individual, again, long before you potentially even get sick. And as a result, we really were the first insurance company in the US, I think, that made telemedicine totally free, to the point where now 70% of all upper respiratory infections of Oscar members, or all rashes of Oscar members, get treated just over the phone or over chats, and totally for free. These are our doctors. You click a button, they treat you 24/7, no costs. That compares to maybe about 2 or 3% of members of other insurance companies having used telemedicine any given year. So vastly different in terms of user engagement, if you will. The second category of technology we built is really in having a full stack of technology insurance. We can tell in real time where our claims are coming in. We can tell the doctor in real time when somebody went to the emergency room, as an example, connect with you right away. And the third aspect is really that we build different partnerships with networks and with systems. As example, I mentioned the Cleveland Clinic, with which we are launching a risk-based insurance plan and a co-brand insurance plan with. We are updating, as an example, about 1,400 data fields about all providers that we service and make available to you on a daily basis. So we know what availability doctors have, where we could get you in. If you talk to one of our telemedicine doctors, that doctor notices that there may be something wrong with you that you got to go and see a doctor for in person, he can right away in real time connect you up to a doctor that can then see you in person. And that requires a data flow between the systems we have in a connectivity back to the network that delivers care, actually, and a just product design that's comprehensive, that is quite unique.
Now, your co-founder is Josh Kushner, Jared Kushner's brother. I'm curious, what kind of a role does he play today?
Josh is my co-founder. We sat together 5 years ago and were complaining about our healthcare experiences. My wife was pregnant with her first kids. No idea how much this would cost me, where this would take me, what I have to do to really help her. I had a little cheat sheet a year later for my daughter's birth that would show me the C-section rates of the OBGYNs that I might encounter that night of the birth when I went to the hospital, using our Oscar data, so I could actually know where I have to watch out for somebody pushing us into a C-section potentially. And Josh at the time was complaining about having gone to the ER, sprained his ankle playing basketball, and having had a bad experience also in trying to get healthcare in a convenient way. So we've been in this since the very beginning, but what we spend our day on, and I see him at least once or twice a day in thinking this through, is we think about what's the next feature we got to launch, how do we make our messaging more powerful, how do we have our concierge teams, which is a unique model. We have any member of Oscar has 4 concierge team members that can watch in real time what's happening with you in the healthcare system, and anytime you talk to us, one of those 4 will talk to you. What is the next feature we launch through those concierge teams? That's what Josh and I talk about every single day.
So, I got to ask, there's a lot of noise around this administration and around Jared Kushner particularly. Does any of that affect you?
I think no. I would say we're heads down. We're building a product. We, if you look at the membership base we have, about a third of the members we have came in because friends and family members told them, go buy Oscar, it's awesome, So we might be the first virally growing health insurance company that ever existed, which is a funny oxymoron in a sense. So that's what we're focused on, heads down on. I do think we have a unique sort of like frontline reporting from changing healthcare system. Again, if we don't do something about the underlying unit cost issue in US healthcare, healthcare is going to bankrupt the country. There is, I think, no way out except for making the system, pushing the system more towards risk sharing, individualization, consumerization. And so we do go out to Republican and Democratic senators and so on and try to share some of these observations we have from the front end of making that transformation happen, because I do think the US healthcare system needs to be more consumerized, individualized. And I am kind of hoping that any conversation happening there right now, which I hope will be eventually bipartisan, will push the system more towards the direction. Otherwise, we're just moving too high costs from left to right. It's not going to help anybody.
Well, we are going to continue to follow you as well as how this all unfolds in Washington. Mario Schlosser, Oscar Health CEO. Mario, thanks so much for stopping by. Now to a deal we have been following. DraftKings and FanDuel have agreed to end their plans to merge. The two companies faced opposition from the FTC. DraftKings CEO Jason Robins said the threat of a long and expensive legal battle was a big factor in the decision, and he noted that DraftKings is on firmer financial ground than it was when the merger was announced in November. Coming up, we head to Sun Valley, where we caught up with Sebastian Thrun, founder of Google X, on his next big thing, turning flying cars into a reality. This is Bloomberg. Twitter executive chairman Omid Kordestani claims the social media platform shouldn't ban President Trump, saying, quote, "It is good to have him talk on Twitter." He spoke to Bloomberg at the Allen & Company conference in Sun Valley, Idaho. The company's average monthly users increased 6% in the first quarter compared to a year ago, in part due to new users following more news and political accounts. Some users, however, have said Trump's tweets amount to cyberbullying. Sticking with the Allen Company conference, David Gura sat down with Sebastian Thrun, the Udacity and Google X founder, father of Google's self-driving car technology. They talked about everything from the future of higher education to his flying car aspirations via Kitty Hawk. Take a listen.
So we had a really good year in terms of growth. We launched a whole bunch of education programs in areas that are really bleeding edge, like deep learning, self-driving cars. And we find that we are kind of the only institution in the world that teaches these kind of skills. And as a result, we have tens of thousands of now paying students and over 1 million active students that come to the sites every week.
Where's the demand coming from? Are companies coming to you saying, look, we need more talent in automated cars, for instance? How are you getting the ideas for which courses to offer?
We go to companies and say, like, what is you most desperate about hiring? And like, for example, Mercedes, Waymo, and others say, oh, we'd love to get more self-driving car engineers. And then we ask companies, like, what would impress you? What type of portfolio that a student project could have done would really impress you? And then they say, oh, it's easy. Like, if your student does this, this, and this, and this, that's really hard. And that becomes our curriculum.
I've talked to people who run community colleges who have programs in place. Google might come in and say, we'll finance a training program and then hire graduates of that program. Are you beginning to see the effects of that now? Are graduates of Udacity getting jobs easily with the companies who've sponsored these courses?
In Silicon Valley, we placed like 1,000 people in jobs recently. We have over 20 people placed at Google. And what's happening is there's such a desperation for talent in Silicon Valley for people who do machine learning or data science or even web design and Android, that these people get swapped up very, very quickly.
How do you fit into the whole landscape of these MOOCs? I know that traditional academic institutions are offering them as well. Do you see yourself as a competitor to them, a complement to them? Where do you fit in the pantheon of companies and institutions offering MOOCs?
We admire the other companies, and it's great to see all of us doing something interesting. I would say existing companies in the MOOC space are more in the college space, where they're all college classes, whereas we derive our content very much from employers. It makes a huge difference in the type of things we teach and the freshness of the material. And then we also certificate people with a credential called degree that industry basically has sanctioned. So in the lifelong learning space, we are probably right now the strongest credential in the world at this point.
How difficult is it to operate and to monitor these programs in as many countries as you're in? I gather over 200 of them.
Yeah.
Difficult, I imagine.
We have now offices massively going to the Middle East right now. We have offices in Saudi Arabia. We're closing a deal right now with Jordan and Egypt and various other countries. And the reason is, when I look at education, I think there's an imbalance. We have phenomenally great universities in the United States, but if you grow up in Syria, your chances to get into this education is very slim. We want to go to the people in this Middle Eastern conflicted region and give them an opportunity to become an Android developer or a data scientist and maybe make $100,000 a year. And we find the reception in those countries is enormously positive because there's almost no alternatives. The universities there aren't that good as our American universities.
So different in a place like that than here in the US, where I imagine you must come up against a hurdle of cachet. That is, an institution that's been around for 100, 200 years, is known, respected. How do you overcome that hurdle? Get somebody to say, I'll pay for this course when I could try to get into another institution.
I mean, that's obviously the Achilles heel of our company, to make us a credible entity. And we worked really, really hard. We work really hard to make the student experience amazing. We work really hard on student job placement. We try to place every willing student in a job. We have programs where we give our students our tuition back if we can't place them in jobs. And we work really hard on employer accreditation for us, where companies come in like Amazon and Twitter and Facebook and Google and many, many, many others to say, look, we give these students equal treatment to, for example, Stanford graduates.
Let's talk about flying cars. This is something that you're keenly interested in now, CEO of Kitty Hawk. Where are we in that process? That sounds like something squarely in the realm of the fantastic. How close are we, do you think, to having them more widely available?
I have my metric, and when I go to people and give them, like, to say 5 years ago I went to automotive CEOs and said I'm working on self-driving cars, I get this smile. Nice you say that, okay. And then they turn away and talk to someone more serious than me. And the same is happening with flying cars, flying machines right now. So when I talk to people, they smile. It's kind of curious, but nah. So we're still in the phase where I think there's no belief in the population that can happen. But when you think about it, transport on the ground is actually really bad. It's very congested. It's hard to get around. It gets more and more congested. The air is free. There's almost nothing in the air. So in the end of the day, when we look forward, say 50 years, 100 years, even maybe 10 years, I see that more transportation, even daily transportation to and from work, will go through the air than on the ground. So we have built a very first prototype vehicle, and we're not the only ones, I should say, of a vehicle that stays over water for now, and it's kind of a water sports tool. It's not a daily transportation medium, but what it has the same elements. It's electric, it's very quiet, it takes off vertically, flies horizontally, and most importantly, we've gotten to the point where we computerize the system so that every person can learn how to fly in 5 minutes, so that we can make flying accessible to a very broad set of people. That system is called Kitty Hawk Flyer. will go on the market later this year. And if everything goes well, we deliver our first units by the end of 2017.
Udacity and Google X founder Sebastian Thrun there with Bloomberg's David Gura. Coming up, WeWork is betting big on Latin America. What is behind the latest expansion into the region? Next. This is Bloomberg. Emmy nominations have been doled out and a major winner has emerged. Streaming services. HBO, which offers its customers streaming now through HBO Now, leads all networks with a total of 110 nominations. Close behind, Netflix, which scored its best haul yet with a whopping 91 nominations. Hulu also has reason to celebrate, receiving a total of 18 nods for The Handmaid's Tale and its first original documentary on the Beatles, and my favorite, Silicon Valley of HBO, with 10 nominations. Well, WeWork is embarking on an ambitious expansion in Latin America. The world's largest co-working space startup is planning to boost the number of people working in its facilities across the region tenfold by the beginning of 2018. The move comes after the startup's recent forays in both China and India. Joining us now to discuss, Bloomberg Tech reporter Olivia Zaleski, and still with us, my co-host David Kirkpatrick of Techonomy in New York. Olivia, talk to us about why WeWork needs this capital.
Well, it's exactly as you just mentioned. The company is growing aggressively globally. It's opening offices in India, Japan, Korea, and those offices are extremely expensive to open. Not only is it a capital-intensive business because you need to hire a lot of people to recruit freelancers and small businesses to take those desk spaces, but you also have to retrofit the buildings that WeWork is signing leases for to make them part of the WeWork brand, and that's extremely expensive up front, so the company needs a lot of cash to do that.
We've reported on some of WeWork's troubles in the past. Why is there this sort of renewed excitement around the company?
I think because the company is seeing a real uptick in enterprise customers. So traditionally, WeWork has focused its efforts on getting freelancers and small businesses to buy desk space or to rent desk space for month to month. But if you're renting desk space to a Microsoft, who would traditionally have a large satellite office, you're renting hundreds of desks to them, and they're not exactly going to not pay the bill. They're going to be consistent, they're going to be stable, and so investors have caught on to that growth in their business. It's the largest growing segment for WeWork, and they're interested in being part of the company.
Some pretty nice looking offices from
plush.
The video that we're showing. David, what's your take on the future of WeWork? How optimistic are you about it?
Well, I'm optimistic in one respect and a little dubious, say, in another. I agree with Olivia. I mean, they put a ton of money into their reworks of retrofits is the word she was using, of these buildings, because they do a beautiful job. And we're in it. WeWork here in Manhattan. It's fantastic. And by the way, NASDAQ has a big space they're moving into in the WeWork I'm in. So just to underscore your point. But I wonder about a $20 billion valuation. You know, it's a real estate business. It's hard to understand how it could possibly be that kind of growth technology kind of business.
Earlier this week, Olivia, we talked about expanding into Tokyo. One of the investors is SoftBank. Why is SoftBank interested?
Probably because SoftBank has a lot of money. It's raised a $93 billion fund, the New Vision Fund. It's done that with Saudi Arabia. $93 billion is a lot of money to put to work. And so I think that's why they've taken a large stake with WeWork, which is expanding in Tokyo. It plans to have up to 20 new office spaces in Tokyo alone.
All right. Olivia Zaleski, our Bloomberg Tech reporter. Thanks so much. David Kirkpatrick, CEO of Techonomy. As always, so great to have you on the show. Over and out. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We are, of course, live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.